foreign ministers of the G7 gathering in the UK to kick off the group's first in-person meeting since the coronavirus pandemic began. The ministers have gathered to address issues including COVID-19 recovery, climate change, and how to deal with challenges from Russia and China. As you say, Anne-Marie, the Secretary of State Antony Blinken is holding a series of meetings this morning, including with Britain's Foreign Secretary Dominic Raab. This comes after Blinken told 60 Minutes the U.S. does not have the, quote, luxury of not dealing with China during an interview last night. So let's bring in Nancy Cordes for more on all of this from the White House. Nancy, it's so good to see you. As we await President Biden's departure there from the White House, you know the G7 summit will be held in Britain next month. It will be the president's first scheduled trip abroad since taking office. How will this week's meetings lay the groundwork for that future summit?
Well, what Secretary Blinken and the other foreign ministers from the G7 countries are looking to accomplish this week is, first of all, to show that they are talking for the first time in person in a meeting of this type in 2 years, try to restore and shore up some of these very important relationships after, frankly, a pretty turbulent 4 years for the United States when it comes to these key allies. The G7 countries make up nearly half of the world's economy, so they're a very critical block of countries. And what the U.S. is hoping, what these other countries are hoping, is to sort of reassert the power of this alliance in world affairs. And they do have some concrete goals that they're going to be addressing both this week when the foreign ministers get together, and then in a month when the heads of state, like President Biden, get together in the UK, which is hosting these G7 summits this year. First of all, they're going to be looking at ways to quickly counter Russian propaganda and disinformation so that they can, in a coordinated way, start to respond very quickly when Russian disinformation pops up, so that they can counter it before it really gets ingrained in the public consciousness. They want to be much more deliberate about how they deal with this as a group, because obviously Russian disinformation is here to stay. And then the other big item on the agenda is looking for ways to stand up to the country that they believe is really their biggest long-term competitor, and that's China. And so that's one of the reasons that, interestingly, beyond the G7 countries that are meeting this week and will meet next month, they've also invited leaders from India, from Australia, from South Korea, and that is not an accident, because they're looking to create and shore up another power center in Asia that can really compete with China's regional and global influence, which many countries have said out loud. And Secretary Blinken said on 60 Minutes in his interview with Norah O'Donnell that is really our biggest long-term challenge, is a growing China that doesn't always play by the rules.
In fact, Nancy, let's play a little bit of that sound from that interview that aired last night. Antony Blinken essentially saying that China is acting more aggressively. Here's what he had to say.
Our purpose is not to contain China, to hold it back, to keep it down. It is to uphold this rules-based order that China is posing a challenge to. Anyone who poses a challenge to that order, we're going to stand up and defend it.
So the U.S. has been pretty outspoken on a number of issues concerning China, including the country's economy, whether or not it is outpacing America's, the potential threat to Taiwan, ongoing human rights offenses targeting Uyghur Muslims. But I guess the question is, there are a lot of things to tackle, but what is the top priority for the Biden administration when it comes to dealing with China?
Certainly, economic competition is a big one, and intellectual property, the stealing of American intellectual property. So you heard the Secretary of State on 60 Minutes be very outspoken about the fact that that China doesn't always abide by the same rules that other countries do. And I think that one thing that's been interesting in these first few months of the Biden administration is that they actually have had some rare praise for the Trump administration when it comes to the tariffs that were imposed on Chinese goods. And I've spoken to the Secretary of Commerce, who has said they're going to keep those in place because they think it's important to send a message to China that if it doesn't play by the rules, that the U.S. is going to respond. And it's another reason that you've seen so much focus on the so-called Quad, the U.S. working with India, with Australia, with South Korea on vaccine development, other issues to try to prop up, basically another economic power center in Asia where the U.S. knows that it's going to be playing on a more level playing field with other countries in the region, and that it's going to be that's going to be a focus of the G7 summit this month, and when President Biden gets to the UK next month.
Nancy, there was another interesting development within the administration. President Biden and the administration is expected to arrange the reunification of 4 migrant families that were separated during the previous administration. Department of Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas spoke about this on CBS This Morning, specifically about how many children remain to be reunited with their families. Take a listen.
This is the work of, once again, the extraordinary commitment in an all-of-government effort following the president's charge that this is a priority. President Biden said we must reunite these families. He directed the creation of a task force of multiple departments and agencies in an all-of-government effort.
So, Nancy, what does the Biden administration's broader effort to reunite the rest of these children look like?
Well, it's fairly laborious, Vlad, because there were such poor records kept oftentimes when these families were separated and when the children were placed in facilities and the parents sent back, deported to their home countries. And so it's a very difficult process, as evidenced by the fact that the administration is making such a big deal of the fact that they are reuniting just four families this week, and there are hundreds more to go. And so what they're doing as they are able to locate these parents in countries like Mexico and Honduras is that they are allowing them to actually enter the United States, and they're being granted what's known as humanitarian parole, because these are individuals, after all, who entered the U.S. illegally. Ordinarily, they wouldn't be allowed to return, but because of all that they and their children have endured over, in some cases, 4 years apart, the Biden administration is not only allowing them to enter legally, but also looking for ways to enable them to secure some kind of longer-term status, recognition of what the U.S. put them through when it deported them without their children. So it's unclear whether the Biden administration is going to be able to find a way to grant this long-term status and exactly what long-term means. But that kind of gives you a sense of the way that it is hoping to treat these parents and these children who were obviously, in many cases, traumatized. Some of these were little babies when they were separated from their parents. Others were teenagers. But it's a long-term process. This is a task force that was established by executive order back in February, and we're just now hearing about some of the first of these children to be reunited with their parents a few months later.
Nancy, Biden administration officials are set to meet with Republicans this week to work on the president's $2 trillion infrastructure proposal. What do we know about those discussions? What will be up for discussion?
Well, we know that the president has actually already been speaking by phone with some of these Republicans, most notably Shelley Moore Capito, a Republican from West Virginia who was one of the key authors of the Republican counter-proposal to Mr. Biden's infrastructure plan. And we know, of course, because we've discussed it, how different these two proposals are. The president's plan, about $2 trillion. The Republican plan, about $600 billion. The president president's plan paid for by reinstating some of the taxes that were cut 4 years ago by Republicans on corporations. The Republican plan doesn't touch taxes at all. It would impose some user fees on people who use roads and bridges and airports to try to pay back some of that money. So massive differences between these two proposals. A lot of what's in the Republican proposal is also in the Biden plan. It's just that there's a lot less of it. And so we're going to see if these conversations between Republicans who genuinely do say they want to see an infrastructure plan passed, but clearly want something much smaller and clearly believe that what President Biden has proposed in many cases doesn't actually constitute infrastructure per se. They want to see those items stripped out of the plan, put somewhere else. So we'll see if they can make some headway and how the White House really characterizes bipartisanship here, because it doesn't really seem like there's a lot of hope that you could meet in the middle when one side wants to raise taxes and the other doesn't. So what constitutes a win here? Does the Biden administration try to break apart these packages and pass one with bipartisan support, one without it? Or does it just get Republicans on board for some of the plan and pass it with only Democratic support? Those are some of the questions we have as the president begins to sit down in person with some of these Republican senators this week.
All right. Nancy Cordes for us at the White House. We know the president's got a tough uphill battle. He's hitting the road today to sell it to the American people. Nancy, we'll be watching.
Thanks. Good to be with you.